Oh my gosh, there are so many. I could tell you about Wendell and how he told the high school class at West Stanley High School that they should be grateful they went to high school because he had to step out of high school at 8th grade. He wasn't allowed to go to school anymore. I could tell you about Sarah and my experience when Sarah and I shared a room at an advocacy conference in Anchorage, Alaska. That would be a funny story. But instead, let me tell you about another family. There was this mom, and she called me and said that her son was in 2nd grade at a school and that he was in a class for kids that had severe and profound difficulties. And her son was really bright, and she didn't think he belonged there, but they wouldn't let him out of the class until he learned to read or write. So I agreed to meet her, and so we met at a restaurant up the street, and we sat outside with our drinks, and her little boy was running around and playing, really cute little kid. We were talking, and she's explaining to me how bright he is, and I'm trying to interact with him. And all of a sudden he says to me, "Miss Peggy, would you like to know how the sewer system in Albemarle works?" He proceeds to explain to me exactly what happens with the water. I'm watching it go down and go down the grate, and then he tells me what happens after it goes in the grate and how it all functions. I'm thinking, this kid is incredibly bright. So I start asking Mom more questions about what's really going on, and she explains. So she and I come up with a plan, and we're going to go to school and we're going to meet with his teachers, and we're going to talk about the fact that he needs to be in a regular classroom the next year. She says to me, "Now, I think I've got this, but I want you to come and I want you to sit next to me, and we're going to do this meeting." So we get in this room, and it was very intimidating. There were probably easily 30 school professionals there, highly educated, all sitting around a big room, all, looking very grim about this bad decision we were about to make. They do the introductions, and Mom says, "Okay, well, the reason we're here is," and she bursts into tears. She just bursts into tears, looks at me and says, "You do it." So I did. So I explained the situation, I explained the child's abilities, and explained that the kid was not getting what he needed where he was. We went around that room, and every single teacher told us we were making the worst mistake possible to put this kid in a regular class. I explained to them what we needed. I explained to them that we needed a one-on-one aid and that we needed a computer. Now you gotta remember, this is probably 20 years ago, and computers were not that prevalent 20 years ago, especially not in schools. But this kid on a computer, I was convinced, could type and write anything that they wanted him to write, and he could certainly read. They told me that they couldn't do that, of course, and I explained to them what the law said and that they had to do it. And I guess they believed me, because the next year that kid went into a regular classroom. His mom calls me halfway through the school year and says, "Guess what? He's on the AB honor roll." I'm like, wow. She calls me at the end of the school year and she says, "They can't believe it. He's on the A honor roll." I said, "Is he still getting all the accommodations we talked about, testing in a separate place and all that?" And she's like, "Yes, and he's learning, and thank you so much." So the mom called me again when the boy was ready to go into middle school and said, "I think I've got this, but I have to ask you a bunch of questions." So she did. And she called me back later and said, "It's all fine, we're good with middle school." She called me again when he went into high school. We talked again, talked about updates to the law and updates to what she might need to talk about. Well, that young man graduated high school with excellent grades. I'm so proud of him, and I'm so proud of his mom, because she stood up for him. She knew what her kid needed, and she stood up for him. And I will never, ever forget that little boy telling me about that sewer system and knowing that this was a kid that needed good education.